Bring in Democratic Congressman Peter Welch of Vermont, who sits on a subcommittee on national security, homeland defense and foreign operations, and has recently travelled in the region. Welcome to you, sir. I want to show you, if I may, Mr. Welch, the latest poll numbers on Syria from Pew Research. It shows 70% of people, 70%, oppose sending arms to Syria. What's your analysis of arming the rebels?
I support the president's restraint on military action, and I don't think we should be arming them. And I support the aggressive efforts for a diplomatic approach. You know, what's very tough here is that the suffering is enormous. And I was in the region. I was at a Syrian refugee camp, and I talked to Syrians who were driven from their homes, saw kids who were burned and maimed. And every fiber in your being wants to take some definitive action. But if we Americanize this civil war, it's going to make things worse, not better. And we send some arms, they escalate, the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah is already involved, and it just increases the cycle of violence. Bottom line here, this is a civil war. We have to learn our lesson. We think we can micromanage using military force. It didn't work out in Iraq or Afghanistan. And in fact, the hard, laborious work of diplomacy is essentially what has to continue. And today we had some progress, it seems, with the direct conversation between Mr. Putin and Mr. Obama.
Well, except that the president did say that they have different positions on Syria, but they've agreed that the violence has to end. But they do have different positions on Syria nevertheless.
Well, they do. I mean, Russia is all in for Assad, or at least for Syria. And the potential outcome here, the positive possibility, would be that, you know, elections are coming up in Syria in 2014. And if the Syrians are given some opportunity to elect their leader, and it's not Assad, and he's persuaded that he doesn't have to run again, and that's obviously a tall order. That's something that the Russians may be able to support. Who knows? But it's being explored. But, you know, the more we get in with American presence, with more and more arms, which then invites a response by Iran and also by Russia, it turns into two things. One, a proxy war that we've seen in the Cold War. And number two, it Americanizes that war, so in the eyes of the Middle East, it really helps the jihadists make the argument that there goes America again. Yeah. So as painful as this is, restraint, I think, is the right approach, and that's largely what the president's been counseling. He's got to take the long view for this country.
And yet, sir, we had Michael O'Hanlon from the Brookings Institution on Friday on this broadcast, and he said that to do this right is going to require far more aid than the president has thus far signaled. Take a listen to Michael O'Hanlon.
Put American boots on the ground as part of a multilateral implementation force, not an invasion force, an implementation force like we had in Bosnia. But in this case, it will be more dangerous and more difficult, and I acknowledge that right up front. We need to have other countries commit right up front to be willing to do it.
Isn't that the challenge, sir, that it's all very well saying a red line has been crossed, chemical weapons have been used, we're going to send arms to the rebels, but as Michael O'Hanlon says, this is a much more challenging set of circumstances and will require far more than just weapons in the hands of rebels.
Well, that's exactly right. And what Mr. O'Hanlon was presenting was not so much an idea as it was a fantasy. There's no chance that the Congress would vote to send American soldiers over there and make that kind of financial commitment, so he can have a theoretical conversation about what it would, quote, take. But remember, in Iraq, the cabinet testimony was that would cost, we'd make money on the war. That was bottom line, more or less, what we were told in the beginning. So Americans have heard this song before. They know it doesn't work. They know that there's a lot of expense, a lot of loss of life, and they also know that we can't micromanage these outcomes. So this is a civil war. It's tragic. It's tragic for Syria. But at the end of the day, there's going to have to be some Syrian leadership here that ultimately takes responsibility for that country. Our country and Russia, with this discussion with Putin, let's hope that we can be constructive and help bring people to their senses. But the idea that we can micromanage and turn this into an Americanized civil war, that we control the outcome, I think is a real stretch.
Well, let's hope that the meeting today at the G8 between the respective presidents is a productive first step. Democratic Congressman Peter Welch, thank you, sir.
Thank you.